So I do want to begin with our devotional time this morning and continue the series that I've begun on Holy Week. And today I want to talk about the first days of Holy Week, Holy Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Now, it's interesting when Holy Week comes around, most people in churches do not even think about Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday of Holy Week. They don't really hold any significant value. I consider these the most neglected days of Holy Week. But should they be? Should these days be neglected? And I would say no, they shouldn't be. But I know in my own church experience, they often are the most neglected days of Holy Week. How did Holy Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday develop? Once again, the Christian pilgrim I've been mentioning, Egeria, in the 4th century, which means the 300s, that would be during the time which Cyril of Jerusalem was bishop. She kept a detailed account of her Holy Week experience in Jerusalem. And it just provides such valuable information for us, her account does. So referring to her account of the days after Palm Sunday, we know that there were minor services on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. On Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, there were minor services. These minor services typically included hymn singing and scripture reading. And during this time, especially on the Wednesday, they would read the scripture of Judas' plot to betray Jesus. And I don't know if you can imagine this or not, but they would read this scripture of Judas' betrayal of Jesus, his plot to betray Jesus. And as they're reading it, the congregation would be going, boo, boo, and they would be, doing things like that because Judas betrayed our Lord. And so it's really a unique kind of audience, a unique situation in which in church, can you imagine them doing that in our church? If we were reading that passage, can you imagine people saying boo, boo, and things like, well, they did back in this time. Now, originally, the Passion account of Mark was read on Tuesday. The Passion account from Luke was read on Wednesday, in addition to the Judas plot to betray Jesus. But with the development, especially of the 3-year lectionary, which is what we follow and most churches who use a lectionary follow during this time, this practice kind of just went away. And so these days became where they focus completely on Christ's passion. But this isn't the way it always was. It was really different. And so these days, though, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, became integrated into Holy Week very early. And yet they are considered these lesser days of Holy Week, and they're often neglected, unfortunately. What is Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday about? Well, Adolf Adam, he explains it this way. He says, like Palm Sunday, the following days of Holy Week are dominated by the theme of Christ's suffering. The readings for the first 3 days of Holy Week are from the first 3 servant songs of the prophet Isaiah, while the gospel pericopes report incident from the last days before the Lord's Passion. So we have the gospel readings during these days, and we also have the servant songs from the prophet Isaiah, which tell what Jesus was about to suffer. And so it talks about his upcoming suffering, and then we have the passion accounts from the gospel, which tell us what he went through. And so these days, they foretell Christ's suffering with recounting the preceding events leading up to his passion. From Isaiah, we see that Christ is the obedient, suffering servant, the servant who gives his life in self-sacrifice for us. And then in the gospel readings, Christ is betrayed by Judas. He's doubted by the crowds. The crowds begin to turn on him. And during this time, we have this Monday through Wednesday, which was really meant to form the setting for Holy Week. For Christ's suffering, for the sufferings that would come as we talk about Monday, Thursday, and Good Friday, And, you know, so I think we're kind of missing something because we don't celebrate Holy Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Those were made to set the scene, to prepare us for what was to come in terms of Christ's suffering and death. And so without those, we kind of just jump from Palm Sunday into Maundy, Thursday, and we have a gap there. And so I think the church wisely intended for us to fill that gap with Holy Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Why celebrate Holy Monday through Holy Wednesday? We celebrate these days to prepare us for the suffering and death of Christ that occurs over the next 3 days. Now, a lot of churches don't celebrate these. The scripture readings for these can be found online. If someone wanted to practice these themselves and maybe their personal devotional time, even if the church doesn't have services during this time, they could. Really, all you would have to do is to Google lectionary Holy Week. And if you Google that, you would find the scripture readings for Holy Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And so here, there are a couple of devotional thoughts as well for these 3 days. One of these is that it's about commitment. Commitment gives meaning to life, even if we must die for it. Jesus came to complete his mission. His mission was to seek and to save those who were lost, us. His commitment to seeking and to saving the lost required his death. I'm probably going to get this quote wrong, but someone one time asked, is there anything worth dying for? And the response was, if there's nothing worth dying for, then there's nothing worth living for. And I think that's captivated in Jesus Christ and what he did for us. Jesus Christ, in his mission to this earth to seek and to save those who are lost, he knew that mission, that we were worth dying for. And that's what he did. He gave his life for us. Our commitments define our lives. Our commitments define our life. Are we committed to Christ? Are we committed to his church? What else are we committed to in our life? Because we define our lives by our commitments. And I think this devotional thought is important. I think that it gives us perspective. And then there's a second devotional thought as well. We prepare for our own death. We prepare for our own death. The scriptures of the opening days of Holy Week prepare us in another way for the approaching end of Jesus' own life and ours, according to John Chitster. Living, in many ways, is preparation for dying. There's no avoiding death unless Christ comes back beforehand. But we should live each day as if we're going to die. And that means living in right relationship to God daily, to always be prepared for death. And I know for me personally, I actually, purchased a book by a Christian Catholic author, a nun, that's on the topic. It's a Lenten devotional, and it's on the topic of preparing for death. And you may think, man, that's grim, and I don't want to think about that. And in our culture, let's face it, we do everything we can do to avoid talking about and thinking about death. And yet, death is a reality of life. Until we accept our death, it's hard for us to fully live our life. And so this morning, that's the second of the devotional thoughts for Holy Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Living should be preparation for dying, not the avoidance of it. What happens after Holy Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday? Well, Wednesday is considered the last full day of Lent. Now, I will comment on this because it's interesting. In some books, they say the last day of Lent is Saturday. In others, they say it's Wednesday. It makes sense to me that the last day of Lent is actually Wednesday. That makes sense to me, because then we go into what's called the Triduum, and that's Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So Lent officially ends on Thursday, and the suffering and death of Jesus begins. I know you may be thinking, oh, you just said it ends on Wednesday. Wednesday is the last full day of Lent, and then part of Thursday still counts as Lent, but then that ends, and we go into Monday, Thursday, and the final 3 days, which is Monday, Thursday, Good Friday, and Holy Saturday. But Lent ends, and the suffering and death of Jesus begins. And that's where it leaves off after that full day on Wednesday. And so I hope and pray that these devotions, these kind of short teachings, are meaningful to you, and that this Holy Week will be meaningful to you. Thank you for joining me this morning. I appreciate those who are listening in and those who will listen in.